This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it's time for the Intentionality Gurus with Candace Pollock. Our title for today's podcast, Your Story versus Your Expansion. Wow, I think maybe I know what it means, but I'm going to let Candace get us started.
So we're building on the other topics, recent topics from that are building on the theme that Kyle Cease writes about in his book, The Illusion of Money. And the idea is that we often set our goals and our priorities around our income and the things we acquire in life and so on. And that doesn't have to change. But what Cease does is he takes the spotlight, and rather than putting it on the main star on the stage, he switches it to maybe the back of the stage, the still on the stage, but in the people in the back, maybe the chorus line or something behind, and focuses on some other details that open up different ways of looking at things. And that's what I love to do, is like, okay, I see this main point, but where are some distinctions where we can see those forks in the road?
Right.
Okay. And so we've established in prior podcasts, based on his writing, that money is not our value. And if we can let go of the idea that the amount of money we have, or the possessions we have, or the titles we might have and so on, are what represent our value, then we can transcend beyond that and have other opportunities show up in our lives. And so if you were to transcend into something, how would you want to be ideally spending your time and focus?
Makes sense.
So how for you, Karen, what would you like to do?
Well, I love how this started out today, because yesterday at my weekend job, I came in as the sales manager, was talking to the crew about getting a different focus on helping customers and selling to customers. And he kept saying things like, that customer may come in for that 80-inch TV, but what is it that the customer really wants? Have a conversation. And basically, like what you were saying, is be able to see the different forks in the road, how you can assist in helping that customer either obtain that 80-inch TV or something else. And as I was listening to him and now listening to you, it's like, too often I get focused on, that I want something to go a certain way. And I start following maybe the same path I've done over and over again. And sometimes it feels like I'm not getting there. But now listening to this is like, you know what? When you want something, take a step back. Number one, figure out if you really want it. And if so, look at the different ways that I can obtain it, rather than going down the same road over and over again, which may or may not work.
Yeah, and may not be gratifying. And we know
Right.
there are other conversations we've had that it may be coming from a reactive part of our experience, rather than a wiser part of
Right.
our experience. So Kyle Cease talks about, money is secondary. So abundance and money, however we want to, categorize our value, it comes secondarily to these other things that he wants us to grasp. And he keeps reinforcing, we are the primary thing. So I have migrated through the book. And so these past podcasts and this one are basically taking different chapters and focusing on the points he's making in them. And so he is saying that what it's all about is our expansion and growth and freedom. And so if you tie that to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where at the base level of the pyramid, we have, our basic needs, food, shelter, and so on.
Right.
And next up would be security, financial, food, blah, blah, blah. And goes on. And at the very top is self-actualization. And so this is what I'm taking, my interpretation of what Cease is telling us, and whether he intended it or not, is that this approach that he's recommending is going to give us the ability to actually start to experience some of that self-actualization and self-fulfillment as we're going through the lower levels of the hierarchy.
Okay, so as we're, finding our nutrition in the first step, we're looking at different ways of obtaining that.
And we're knowing that it's a means to an end, not the end. But the end isn't the money. It isn't the food. It isn't the, this or that. It's ultimately so that we can be actualized.
Okay.
Or in another group I belong to, we called it being optimized, living to your optimal self, however we find it, each individual defines it.
Right.
So he says that we can be 1,000 times stronger in whatever way we want to be if we aim for expansion versus money or the temporary goal that we've set for ourselves. And it sounds a little esoteric and so on, but the point of the story is that we could just open our eyes, like that optical illusion that I talk about in magazines, is that
right,
a picture of an old woman. If we can just pivot our focus and say, okay, I'm going to just try and that on for a moment, that if we were focusing on what's behind this goal that we described, because we don't often give a lot of attention to that. So anchoring back to your experience at work. So the customer comes in and they want that 80-inch screen TV. Like, okay, who has that kind of wall space to devote to
right.
it? But there's a program that I attended a cajillion years ago on listening skills, and we were taught to listen to the emotional message behind the phrases that people were using. So I want an 80-inch screen TV. So what might be the emotional message behind that?
Well, they want to impress a friend, or they've been, living their life wanting to have the bigger, the better. And I see that within my own household with my husband. He grew up in a home that I won't say they were affluent, but they were extremely comfortable. And it was always about replacing something with something better. And his mother and father believed that brought happiness. And sadly, I mean, I've known from the beginning it does not. And if we can hear what the message is, again, let's go back to that 80-inch TV. Somebody says that they want it. It's not to ask them why they want it, but ask them questions around it, such as, do you have a wall big enough to put up that 80-inch TV? How are you going to, place that 80-inch TV, and start getting some feedback, and almost start to find out that maybe that's really not what they want, but they're dreaming of it more than wanting it.
Right, and they think that outcome is going to give them what they need, when if we delve into it a couple of layers deeper, it doesn't have to be, deep mining, especially in a commercial store setting.
Right.
But, into deep psychological needs and so on. But it might sound like, so you're hoping to have fun family get-togethers, watching the football game.
Right.
Or, testing the waters on how they envision it, what it's going to do within the family. Now, if they're on their own, if they live alone, that might open up different conversations.
Right.
So the whole idea then is, you can accept the external goal. Obviously, it's not our position to reject our own plus others' external goals, but be getting into, how does this expand that individual? And just allow that interaction to evolve with ourselves and so on. And then he talks about expansion as being our life force. So what occurs to you when you hear me say that?
That we're never satisfied with where we are. We always think we need more to make us more whole.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's that self-actualization again. It's just this human nature thing. Apparently, maybe it's in other mammals. I haven't quite seen it in the creatures I live with at home here, these little mammals. But for all I know, they may have the same thing going on. But I did an exercise a couple of years ago on trying to find my core motivation, and I went through the exercise, and what it turned out to be was I'm looking for the untapped potential. So when I'm coaching, there's always a place where the person is and where they want to be, and there's a gap, and then we find ways of, closing that gap or traversing it. And so with other people, it may be, nurturing or sharing or just a whole bunch of ways, but each one of us has a primary motivation that is a through line for everything we do in our personal lives, our work lives, and so on, all of our relationships and activities. I even saw it in some of the jobs I had when I was a teenager. I was a lifeguard water safety instructor. And to take them from, not being able to swim at all and being afraid of water to being confident. And then that confidence could carry over. Now, I wasn't that esoteric when I was, 18, 19, but
right.
Back on it, I do see that. So in your activities, where do you see a common thread? What is it about what you do?
Well, when I first started, it was to get me through some difficult choices I had been making. And so I needed to communicate openly with individuals. So I created certain podcasts so that I could see the world differently, not necessarily feeling like I had to copy them, but to know that, there were other opportunities out there. I could face my challenges. And that's grown over the time. However, when I think there's a brass ring that I want to grab at, I'm finding that the more work I do going towards it, I do take that fork in the road because I realize that's not the brass ring I want. And I can do something different.
And I have a sense from observing you just in the time I've known you, but you tell me where I'm wrong. I have a sense that with each new fork, you've been expanding and finding more opportunities and growing.
Right. Absolutely. And, I don't know about all of our listeners, but I believe that my generation was brought up that you create a path as you're graduating high school, basically going on to college. What is your life going to look like? And you sort of plan your steps along that way, whether it's going to college, going to trade school, just getting a job, focusing on finding a partner in your life. And I will say, probably for the first 50 years of my life, that's what I was doing. I was plodding along to follow a path. And even though I had fallen off the path numerous times, I kept finding that I had to jump back on it. And there was something about reaching 50 that I said, well, what am I doing? I don't think I'm ever going to have that house with the white picket fence. So let's enjoy what I do have. Or let's go down another path and look for something else. And that has made me feel more whole than the first 50 years of my life.
And I love that, the more whole, because that's the whole idea. So Cease talks about combining the heart and the mind, in terms of our heart's desire and as part of the expansion, not just the money part. And he's not at all anti-money. He's quite successful, but his premise is that by focusing on the highest inner intention in his life, the overarching theme, so to speak, all of that abundance will come to us. Now, it sounds a little woo-woo to me. I mean, I've moved pretty far down the woo-woo spectrum from where I started out when I first started exploring these things. But I do see that these things happen. So the more things that we can be open to, the more things are open to us. I think that is a fair premise.
Absolutely.
So he's saying a goal is something that you can, an outcome that you articulate, and it's in the future. Whereas expansion is in us every day to fully experience what we're doing. And it's an internal direction, but it's directionalist in a way, because it's just how we be, how we embody our lives.
Right.
We surrender the results. We're not focused on the result. We're focused on the possibilities that are opening up to us, so that we see even more forks in the road. Doesn't mean that we're going to be, one part of me when I first read it thought, well, gee, I have enough possibilities. I have enough forks in the road. And actually what I have is many more distractions than I need. So being aware of the expansion approach actually, got me in touch with my higher intention, which is to help others close the gap on where they, on their untapped potential. And then anchoring to Sean Aker's quote, that happiness is the joy you feel growing towards your potential, helping everybody find that joy for themselves. So if I anchor to that and not whether I'm getting paid for this or that activity, I'm not going to refuse the payment, but it has taken some of the angst out of it. So how might that show up in your endeavors?
Well, it shows up in many different ways. Number one, for my weekend position, when I started repping, about 20, almost 20 years ago, my first reaction to what I had to do was to focus on, whether it was making the sale or having somebody say yes, having them not walk away. And I was so focused on that a lot of the time I was not as successful as I needed to be. In the last couple of years, I've looked at it differently, and it's what is the challenge now? What am I going to learn from it? And am I going to be able to assist somebody? And assisting somebody may be whether it's getting the sale or having them acknowledge the fact that, this isn't for them, and they walk away. And I do that with so many other things now in my life. I mean, even with the podcasting, I've had a few people come to me with certain topics that, they'd like to bring to New Cleveland Radio. And in the past, I would just jump in and say, okay, fine. Yeah, come join us. But now I look at it and I observe it, and I make sure that I have a connection with it. And I give myself the opportunity to figure out if I do or not. I'm not just automatically saying yes or no. And I think that has come a lot from these podcasts, because I keep learning that, in life, there's very few things that are absolutely right or absolutely wrong.
Lovely, lovely. And it sounds like you're being more of a curator than just a podcast hosting company.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. That's really cool, because Cease talks about the intention for doing things is the primary goal, to see what it becomes, whatever it is, and how might that alter your external goals. So another concept, and he's not the first to say this, is that as we open up our possibilities, those forks in the road, we'll see other opportunities that we would not have seen. So if we're only going down the one path, we're going to always see the billboards we've always seen and the shops that we've always seen and the people we regularly see. Where if we open up other forks, and even if we back up and don't pursue it much further, but we go down at least a piece of it, there's going to be new things that we're going to see, and that may open up other possibilities.
Absolutely.
That may in turn impact what goals we're setting for ourselves. So I coach a lot of small law firm owners through a national group, and a lot of them set dollar goals. And the dollar goals aren't really speaking to them, and many of them don't have the mindset where they think they're worth it, and so on. But we're all taught to set that BHAG goal, the big, hairy, audacious goal. And it doesn't always work because we're not getting to that inner intention. If we can anchor them to, think of what you may of lawyers, most of them are do-gooders at heart. Yeah, every profession has the people that are mercenary, but most of them really want to help their clients. And if they can tap into that bigger intention, then abundance comes to them. And I'll just share a brief story about a young attorney that was not doing well. He's in a tiny town, but he also does part-time work for a firm in a larger town. And so 3 days a week, he's in a small town, and he just wasn't getting the business, and people just weren't moving forward, and so on. Really personable. And we just started talking about how he was kind of squandering his energy by putting all of his energy in that other work, et cetera. And then we just naturally got to what his big intention was, tapping into that, his big heart to help people. And he was able to bring that energy more directly and intentionally to the work in his small town. And he just emailed me over the weekend and said that he had the best week of the time that he's been on his own in his 3 days in his hometown, because he realizes he let go of, he had to have the dollars to pay his overhead and this and that. He was just helping people. So that's an example of the expansion.
Love that.
I love it. I'm really happy for him. So it's in essence working from the inside out, according to Cease, and embodying that inner intention. And the thing that he uses, a phrase that I just love, he calls it, we have an intention deficit disorder, not attention, but intention disorder. So if we can be anchoring to our intention and expand on that, we can, be successful, presumably, however we define it. And then the abundance is the side effect, is living as our intention. So any ideas about how, in a practical sense, how you would bring that to your daily activities and the podcasting and so on?
Well, I think what a lot of it is for me is doing things that not just bring me joy, but make me feel, keep making me feel whole. And I think my listeners are going to see that in the next couple of weeks, because two of the newest podcasts that I'm working on, one that you will be joining us on, talking about grief for a lot of people would be like, why do you want to go down that road? But I just find it so deeply embedded in me. Not that I'm grieving for anything in particular. It's not that I'm walking around crying and saying, woe is me, but I've been there. And if I can help just one person by putting this panel together for a new podcast, that's a new focus, and it's taking me down a different path. And then the other one that we're going to be doing on anti-bullies, that is so deeply ingrained in me that, I'm finally letting it out. So the difference here is I'm not just tapping on something that says, oh, I think this is an interesting topic, but I'm saying it's deep in here. And if I can start to release it, I'm going to be better for it.
So what I'm taking from that is that rather than focusing on, is this podcast going to make me money and, support my business goals and so on, it is a higher intention of these are important topics, and
Absolutely.
the people listening to New Cleveland Radio to be exposed to these topics. And obviously, if it resonates for them, they can learn a lot of things and tap into that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so what might that do for you ultimately? What would be some of the abundance byproducts of that? And it doesn't have to be just money.
Sure. Some of the positives from it is that I'm going to be able to sort of release some of my angst based on how these move forward and understanding things that I may be out of touch with. Also, so many of us walk around saying, boy, I just want to help people. And yet, and I think I've said it on this show before, I would make a terrible nurse. And usually when people say they want to help somebody out, it's about nursing or mending wounds. And I'm far from that. But when I say I want to help people, is not that I necessarily have to give them advice, but I want to help them find the opportunities that are going to satisfy them. And when I started listening to other people and allowing them to guide me, I had the opportunity to start choosing, do I want to follow that path? Don't I? Or how do I want to modify it? And that to me really creates a wholeness for us.
Yeah, spot on, spot on. So you're living what Cease is talking about.
Yep.
Saying allow your inner intention to override your unconscious mentor or your focus. And getting to the story, we all have that internal story about what we're capable of and what we're not capable of, what we should and shouldn't do, and so on. So, but everything we're doing is either pulling us towards expansion or away from expansion. So the intention deficit disorder is pulling us away, all the things we do to squander our attention, and calls it addictively shrinking into our mental story of who we are and who we are not. And so I'm hearing that, and I'm seeing and experiencing, since I've known you, how you're expanding not only opportunities for New Cleveland Radio and you yourself personally, but for people listening and people sharing like me. And look how much more impact that is in setting a goal that you want, 15 new podcasts or something. You see what I'm saying?
Yep. And, it's funny because one of the things that I was hearing last week in a group discussion was about, this 80-20 method of, just hold on to the 20% of things that you need to focus on. And, I had read about it and heard about it prior, but it didn't make sense to me until we had this open discussion. And I thought, oh, this is great. I'm going to go into the next day and I'm going to, be focused on what I need to do. And instead, what I did, I was focusing on the 80, not the 20. And then all of a sudden it just hit me on Saturday. What am I doing? I'm nervous. I found I was nervous, anxious. I just wasn't doing things right. And all of a sudden it hit me and it was like, okay, wait a second. I don't need to do all this other stuff. And I turned on my phone to the memo area and I recorded, only do what you need to do. And all of a sudden it was like, I was doing all the things I needed to do. And realized also when I got home from work that day that I knew there were other things like laundry and preparing a website for somebody. I knew I had those things, but it was like, this is not the time. And so I compartmentalized it. That's 80%, and I can't do it right now. But this is my 20% that I'm going to do right now. And part of that 20% was just to sit and vegetate for a while. And, it was like, where did this person come from? But, again, as I tell our listeners, I grew up in, a family that you were always doing the next thing. And you were thinking about what the next thing is that you had to do while you were doing one thing. And, I've continued to live my life that way, but every once in a while I get caught up and it's like, okay, got to take that step back. So, I hope our listeners understand that, none of us are perfect. I call myself a type A personality. I probably always will, but if I can catch myself and slow down and focus on what makes me feel good, I'm better for everybody else around me.
And that's true for all of us, so that we all have that inner intuition and so on, and just to pay attention to it. And when we start to feel anxious, we're probably going in the prior story that constricts us. And when we are feeling elated or a sense of excitement, we're probably going in the direction of expansion. Expansion will take us to our abundance, which transcends just money. So money, yes, is important for all of us. We need it to support ourselves in our endeavors, but we can also have fulfillment in the long run.
Absolutely. And if I win the lottery, that wouldn't be so terrible either.
No, and Ohio is one of the few states that are left where you can keep your identity secret, so that people won't.
Oh, all right. Hey, I love that. Well, this was even more interesting than I thought it was going to be. Well, I think all of the subjects are very interesting, but, and I have to, apologize to our listeners. There are some times that as Candace is going through a topic, I sit here thinking, can I do that? How does it apply to me? And even sometimes when I've answered you in the past, Candace, afterwards I'll think, what did I say? Did I really hear what she asked? And then I go back and I listen to the podcast. It's like, yeah, I was listening, but sometimes I too get overwhelmed. So
yeah, and so the metaphor that I use is with all of these things, and I have to listen to my own statements, is just try the jacket on. We're not asking you to buy it, but just
right. I
just
love
test
that.
it. Look at that little fork on the road. Maybe it's something you want to take.
Well, thank you again. And we will do this again in 2 weeks. And everybody enjoy your day. And let us know how this topic may affect you in your life. That would be interesting to hear. Talk to y'all soon. Bye.